So a lot of what we've done today is both a combination of prior experience, what we do at Autopilot, as well as many engagements, sort of benchmarking across many customers. We have a large SaaS customer base, as well as sort of independent research in the industry. And we've attempted to formulate that into an actual model and a repeatable process here that can be implemented and used by new companies coming on board regularly. So, before even building out that experience, it's important, obviously, to do your homework. And that starts with defining your target personas, right? Define their needs, their decision-making criteria, and know how you can help. So we've got some good content in Flight School, which is our online sort of learning and training platform that really digs deeply into there. This little sneak peek at our own one, you can see we have a marketing manager and a director of growth, sort of the less savvy and the more savvy. And we've mapped out at a very high level what their needs are and why they buy and so on. Every company at some level should have this built in. It's usually a cross-functional effort, and it really brings focus across departments and helps with some of the sort of tactical pieces we're going to get into shortly here in terms of literally building out messaging and so on. So we at Autopilot focus on both of these, and there's certain implications there. So the next sort of piece of homework, and this is actually from analysis I did back in my previous company, which is you want to get a firm grasp on the actual usage patterns, which is when, how, and how frequently people are using your product or your SaaS app. So one telling piece of analysis we did back at Zendesk, this was here looking at tickets, but this would be the same for many different companies. One or two core metrics is get a feel for how does usage vary during that period of time when they first engage your product. So what we saw was that when you break it out over that 30-day period, you really get, first of all, we really sort of saw three distinct phases, right? The first was, there was a first couple of sessions. So that first 48 hours is a critical time period. Usually it's your first sort of 1 to 2 sittings within using a product. And during that time, you see initial impressions being made, and it's a critical period where you see fast growers who move up from there, and people can poke in and never return again. There's a second phase, which is sort of up to about the first 8 days, where we saw usage sort of increase, and that's being lifted by heavy users, and it's being pulled down by people who've already dropped off. But that first 8-day period is also the second sort of critical phase of using a SaaS application. And then the third usage phase is really the entire rest of the trial. In that case, it was 30 days. Some companies it's 15, some companies it's 45 or 60. But it's a phase where there's been some segregation where the early adopters are off to the races, and you have early stage users who were never really qualified dropping out. And you'll see the interesting thing at day 30 here, you suddenly have this big spike, and that's mainly because the buyers have actually are still using, and everybody who's not buying can no longer be using, and therefore you basically see all the non-users drop out, and therefore the aggregate numbers jump up massively. So from this, you're getting a sense of the usage patterns. The goal is to develop some engagement objectives. First of all, motivate the determined users, right? So determined users, every company has them. We love them because of the fact it makes our jobs easy and it makes us look really good. They come on board, they know what they want. They're sometimes repeat buyers, they're returning, or they just get it. And the goal with motivated, determined users is to outline advanced concepts, give them best practices, be targeted in how you're messaging them, and essentially help them to recognize value quicker and more completely. Then there's a second sort of interesting category, which is the slow starters. These are motivated trialists who are there for a real reason, but they're either busy, maybe they're very high level, you'll hear things like it's not a priority right now, they're maybe distracted, but they absolutely have a core reason why they're trialing your application. The goal with them is to enable them, help them along the way, provide useful tips that are targeted, provide core concepts that help them sort of understand your product and your service much more quickly, and help them through. And then the third is you have this sort of drop-off category, right? These are typically like poorly qualified signups who maybe found you through non-inbound methods or from ads, or they're very early in the buying cycle. They're just researchers who've signed up for a trial because it's all they can figure out how to do with your company, but they don't really want to be using yet hands-on. And really the goal with these users is to educate those who really aren't ready to get going. And within there is a section or a segment usually of users who you can re-engage and pull back in. So they were drop-offs that you can recover, bring them back in, get them hooked, get them using the product. And others you want to move to a longer-term nurture track for education so they return again in the future. So we've sort of understand our buyer personas, we've understood and user personas, we've understood and developed engagement objectives. So now we sort of start to get into it. We've got a firmer grasp of like the foundation. Now it's time to move into building out an actual platform for building a trial. And at a high level, we're basically saying people come to your site and sign up. Through a range of personalized or targeted approaches, we're going to activate them and help them get and recognize value quickly, and then convert them into a paying customer. And sort of a benchmark, sort of rule of thumb, companies who get active during the course of a trial, those who reach an activity stage, are about 3x more likely to buy than inactive users. And that's sort of a number that sort of continues to come up in different companies and different use cases, but a major increase, obviously, in getting customers successful. And so, much of today's story we're going to go into and do some building is, like Mike said, around his new startup called Lunchbox.
Yeah, I figured that SaaS multiples in the online storage space are declining, and Box isn't doing so well, so my competitor is Lunchbox, which is the demo company we'll be using today. And so we're going to build out a full-on trial for Lunchbox. I will say before we go into this, there's really two pieces to this story. The first piece is the in-app experience that you build throughout the trial experience from the moment they sign up right through to the in-app experience. And this is something we, I must admit, internally worked with and struggled with and continue to work with internally, which was how do we get the user to an activated state and also an aha moment in our app. And me and our UX and UI designers sat in a room, locked ourselves in the room and refused to come out basically until we could get our activation rate much higher. And one of the things that we saw was that as people would go through the application, if they actually set something up and completely executed it, which may sound obvious to everyone listening, we would literally hear on the user testing videos them say, oh my God, I did it, or like, I did it, oh cool. And you would hear in their voices this excitement of them completing something. So what we're showing you today is the communication that supports the other half. So we're going to make the assumption that you're kind of working on the in-app experience, and then as marketers that we can supplement that working in line with the product team. So we're going to assume that Lunchbox has a world-class onboarding experience in app. And Guy's going to just step you through our 6-step process to nailing a trial, and then I'm going to live build for the Lunchbox site, which I'll tell you more about.
Cool. All right.